The Black Studies program at Cleveland State University welcomes you to this season of Images, a public affairs radio forum dedicated to open dialogue on a variety of diverse topics of interest and issues of concern, which focus on the life and experiences of African Americans and all peoples of African descent. By visiting our website at www.csuohio.edu/blackstudies or calling 216-687-3655, you can learn more about upcoming Black Studies program events and activities. Now, here is your host for Images.
And welcome to Images. I'm Prester Pickett, co-hosting today Images with Dr. Thomas Bynum, the director of the Black Studies program.
It's good to be here.
Our conversation today allows us to engage in an exciting discussion with Dr. Kimberly P. Johnson. Dr. Johnson is an associate professor of communications at Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. Dr. Johnson, welcome to Images.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This opportunity to have this discussion with you advances because you will be participating with delivering a lecture here at Cleveland State University entitled Womanist Preaching, Speaking Truth to Power.
Yes.
Our conversation continues now with us having you share some information about what brought you to that research topic.
Okay. Well, before I went into academia, I was in full-time ministry. And when I was in full-time ministry, I was always amazed at the type of preaching that I heard. And I really loved it when I heard preaching from African American women. And so I knew that when I went to University of Memphis and became part of their PhD program, I knew that I was going to want to research the preaching of African American women. Now, I didn't have the language for it yet, because when I was in seminary, I only learned about feminism. I didn't know anything about womanism. It wasn't until I got to Memphis that I started to learn about womanism, because there was a woman, her name is Dr. Valerie Bridgman. She was teaching at Memphis Theological Seminary, and I was allowed to take classes at the seminary if they were going to help me with my research. So I enrolled in her class. Her class was on feminist and womanist theology for preaching and worship. And that's when I really learned about womanism. And so that's what gave me the language. And so then once I had the language, I had to figure out, okay, well, who self-identifies as a womanist preacher? And so I had to go on the hunt and find some women who are considered exemplars of womanist preaching. And that's really a good way in how the project developed. And then it really swung into high gear once I heard a sermon by Reverend Dr. Claudette Copeland. She came to my church in Memphis. At the time, I was attending Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church. And she came for the Breast Cancer Awareness Sunday. She preached a sermon. Her sermon was at least an hour and 15 minutes. So it was a long sermon. She told everybody, turn to your neighbor and tell them you're going to be here for a minute. So she was funny, and she was very transparent. And in her sermon, she talked about breast cancer and having gone through breast cancer. And I just remember after that particular worship service and going out to dinner, I had a chance to walk up to her and ask her if she self-identifies as a womanist. And she said that she does, but she doesn't think that it comes across clearly in her preaching. And so that got the wheels to, rolling. And I got to thinking, well, if she can say that and she's got such a massive preaching career already, then I'm sure that there are others who might say the same thing. And so she's definitely one of the preachers that I examine in the book.
And this conversation now intersects with us here at Cleveland State University through the Black Studies program. So as our conversation continues, Dr. Bynum.
So the title of your book, The Womanist Preacher, Proclaiming Womanist Rhetoric from the Pulpit, how does rhetoric relate to womanist preaching?
Okay. So the PhD program that I was in at University of Memphis was in the communication department, but I was in their program in rhetoric. And when I try and break down what rhetoric means to my students, I like to tell them that rhetoric is the beautiful umbrella term
Yes.
where all communication, whether verbal or nonverbal, if it communicates a message, it's going to fall under the umbrella of rhetoric. And then if we think about rhetoric in the sense of how Aristotle describes it, then Aristotle says, let rhetoric be defined as the ability in any given situation to find the available means of persuasion. And so we look at the persuasive elements.
The opportunity for us to understand how your research informs your teaching. Can you share that, please?
I can. So with my senior project capstone course that I teach, I actually use my book to help them figure out how to go about structuring their own research papers. It's not a required text, but it definitely is listed under suggested readings. And plus, our library has a copy of my book anyway. And then I have a couple extra copies, so I have a tendency to just bring the copies to class. And so anyway, we will go through the introduction, because the introduction in the book is set up a lot like their prospectus assignment, which is their research proposal that they have to write for me first. And then I have to sign off on that before they can execute their actual research paper or their creative project. And after we look at the introduction, then I take them through some of the other chapters. In chapters 2 through 5, I do a mini literature review at the beginning of those chapters. And so we will typically look at those many literature reviews to help my students understand what they're supposed to do when they have to turn in their literature review assignment. Because when I tell them, I want you to pull out the arguments that these authors are making, that these scholars are making, and put them into conversation with each other, if they haven't done that before, then it sounds like a task that's just too much to ask. And so I have to put something in front of them to help them see how you make that happen. And I explained to them that you're going to read a scholar, that person's work might be in a scholarly journal article, and then you're probably going to have a book, and then you're probably going to have another scholarly journal article. And I tell them that I want them to put these conversations, or put these scholars in conversation with each other and make it seem organic. And so that really helps them. And then when we look at the conclusion, of course, that helps them to figure out then how do you summarize briefly what you've already done? How do you get at answering research questions? And then how do you look ahead? How do you look at the future?
So what has been most rewarding about teaching for you? Is it the moment when the light bulb comes on? What would you say is one of the most rewarding aspects of teaching?
It is. It's definitely when the light bulb comes on and something clicks and they figure it out and things make sense, and then they're able to just soar from that point on. And I get to see them take their own passion, because I always encourage my students, whether it's a senior project capstone course or any other course that I'm teaching, if you're going to write a paper or if you have to do a project, make sure that it's on something that you are passionate about, because if it's not, then you're just making the assignment that much more difficult. And so when I see the light bulb click and I see them soar and they're going forward with their passion, and the creative wheels are turning, and they are really doing due diligence in writing up a research paper, that just makes my heart happy.
Good.
It does. It makes me feel like I've done my job.
Yeah, we both can relate. Yes.
How do you balance the ministry and academia?
Yes, balancing is hard, and I think that anyone who has to balance ministry and academia would tell you that ministry does have a tendency to take a back seat, especially when you have to go through the process of tenure and promotion, and then when you want to jump through the next hoop and become a full professor at an institution, you really gotta hit the grind on cranking out a lot of publications, whether they are monographs or whether they are journal articles. And so the ministry does take a back seat, but it's not to say that I don't do ministry anymore. I do. I just do it a little differently. And so as opposed to being in full-time ministry, I look at it as a part-time type of deal. And I'm one of the ministers at my home church, New Covenant Christian Church, and I am over the college assimilation ministry, and actually our college students attend TSU, which is pretty cool because they get to see me in both lights. They get to see me in my office or in the classroom at TSU in that environment, and then they get to see a more personal side of me, the minister, the ordained minister.
And seeing the prestige with you being a licensed and ordained minister.
Exactly.
In the Christian church, Disciple of Christ.
Right.
The opportunity to also announce that we were excited to receive support from the United Pastors in Mission. President, Pastor Dr. Larry Macon announced your engagement with us here at Cleveland State University to the ministers there. So we're appreciating his support for that as well.
That is awesome.
How has your training in the ministry informed the way you see academia? Is there any kind of connection there in terms of the perspective that you bring to the classroom and to your students?
I think that my ministerial training, from being a children's pastor to an associate pastor, walking with people through the good times and the bad, I think that it helps me to have more empathy than what I normally would have had. Not to say that I am giving my students passes and stuff like that, but to at least empathize with them and try to do whatever I can to assist them, in their current situation. So it's made me more sensitive in that sense. I think it also causes me to, this is actually the research portion too. So it's the research, the womanist aspect, and ministry. It really causes me to encourage my students to always try and find something that they're passionate about, because womanism is about your lived experiences, and it's situated in the African American female experience. And so I try to encourage them to come up with something, a lived experience that they're passionate about, and let's look at that, let's research that. And when they come up with something that they're passionate about, I get some really good projects.
Now, we are going to have an additional exciting experience with you, because you will be able to engage our students in a conversation at an Umoja Roundtable.
Yes.
Where this is a student-led conversation, and they will be able to talk with you about a number of things. So as you will be able to greet our students, can you share on air what you would possibly say to encourage them, to encourage young African American women even who are considering the profession that you're in currently?
Okay.
Or professions, I should say.
Okay. All right. So I would say if a young African American woman is interested in either going into ministry or interested in going into academia, it always helps if you can find someone that you can latch on to or be a mentor to you, that's always going to help the process and help the individual in navigating through the process. Because, when you're going down a path that you've never walked before, it does help to actually discuss what it is that you're experiencing, what it is that you're facing, the challenges and all that. And sometimes you need someone else to help you navigate those hills and those valleys. So the main thing that I would suggest is, if you can, to find a mentor. Now, if you can't find a mentor, then the next best thing is to look at the work, whether it's a minister who's written books or whether it's someone in academia who's written books. Look at the work, the published work of people that you admire. Read their work. See what they say. Understand their stories. Understand how they got from point A to point B, because that will help that individual navigate through that process.
And in addition to that conversation that you'll have with our students at the Umoja Roundtable, want to remind our listening audience that Dr. Kimberly P. Johnson, pastor, will present a lecture as part of the Ralph Pruitt Lecture Arts and Media Series here at Cleveland State University, a lecture entitled Womanist Preaching, Speaking Truth to Power. This will be held Thursday, March 21st, 2019. There is a book signing, so there's the opportunity for individuals to support you and to learn more about your scholarship with the purchase of that book. The event is going to be held in the Howard A. Mims African American Cultural Center, as well as Berkman Hall, room 136, where your lecture will present itself to our community at 6 p.m. We will also have a reception. So for those who were able to receive a special invitation through the support of Reverend Dr. Larry Macon, president of the United Pastors in Mission, they are encouraged to join us for a fellowship with you thereafter, and then conversations with other faculty, staff, and students here at Cleveland State University in the company of Dr. Thomas Bynum, director of the Black Studies program.
Yeah, I want to circle back to a point that you made about how you balance, academia with the ministry. What would you consider most challenging, having dual roles here? And as you said, you had to put the ministry on the back burner for some of the issues related to academia, such as tenure and promotion. But what would you consider most challenging for you as you operate within those two professions?
As I operate within the two, I think that the most challenging piece is the ministry aspect. Because if you are someone in academia and let's say you go to a church and there are so many events and ministries that are going on that are doing great things, and of course ministry takes people in order to work effectively, and so to try and get more participation, of course they're going to ask people to join and do something. And so the part that's the most challenging for me is that with being in academia, I just don't think that people understand why I have to say no sometimes. And I think that they don't understand that because not everyone is going to work doing their or teaching their classes, doing their own administration, and then picking up their own committee responsibilities. So I'm the assessment coordinator for the department, so those kind of responsibilities. Plus I'm chairing a search committee right now. And then when I go home, I've got to grade papers, grade quizzes, read papers. Plus, I also have to keep up on my research agenda, and I have to continue to present at conferences and all of that kind of stuff. And so not only am I grading papers and reading papers, but then I'm also having to carve out time to write and research, and all of that takes a lot of time. So unfortunately, ministry, takes a back seat. But then I would also add in that, some of my social life takes a back seat, because there just isn't that much time in the day to do all of those things.
So how does your research add to the conversation about the Black church, and then more specifically the role of Black women within the church? Can you share a little of that?
Okay. So, womanist preaching, it came out of the dissatisfaction with Black preaching and Black liberation theology. So you have Black liberation theology that was able to find a message of liberation within the scripture as it relates to racism, but they couldn't find that when it comes to sexism, right? And then you have Black preaching that would continually put women in their place, okay, which is oppressive. And so womanist preaching came out of that dissatisfaction, and it is, womanism in itself is a methodology, okay? And so it gives us these rhetorical tools and these rhetorical strategies that gives us ways in which we can help to liberate all oppressed people. So womanist preaching is not just looking to liberate African American females, even though womanism is based in the lived experience of African American women. No, womanists believe that if you focus on the person at the bottom of the totem pole, then everyone else by default will be elevated. And so it is a great lens to use in any kind of preaching that you do to lift up and fight for the wholeness of all people.
Good.
With an opportunity on April 4th through the Black Studies program, we will have a program entitled Truth Crushed to Earth Solidarity Day. It also is accompanied by a Black History Mannequin Challenge where our students dress up as various historical figures.
Okay.
On the screen is one of the images from the collection here at Cleveland State University in the Michael Swartz Library of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as he visited Cleveland on several occasions, and there were several connections that we've discussed about him being here. Wanted to ask if you can reflect on the civil rights movement in particular in regard to how the womanist perspective emerged there and advances, so that when we have this celebration, as well as having a celebration of Ella Josephine Baker, we can also consider the strong women voices that can be revisited and posted in the Howard Mims Cultural Center.
Absolutely. Well, first, Alice Walker is the woman who coined the term womanist. Now, she first mentioned this term in her 1979 short story titled Coming Apart. And it wasn't until 1983 that she actually gave a definition to this term. Now, how does that relate to civil rights? Well, originally, Alice Walker was a feminist. However, at the same time that the second wave feminist movement was happening, the civil rights movement was happening at the same time. And she also partnered with her brothers and sisters in the civil rights movement. And so with that partnership, that encouraged her and motivated her to look beyond self and to actually fight for other people as well. And so that is what prompted her to redefine herself. And that's how she went from being a feminist to actually being a womanist and just leading such a great movement for so many women.
And I'd imagine with your scholarship that there is a trajectory that traces back through the top of the century as well. Even when I heard your title, a brilliant title, Womanist Preaching, Speaking Truth to Power, I thought about Sojourner Truth as well with that.
And I thought about Joanna Lee.
Yes, I think about Joanna Lee. Yeah,
yes.
she has this 1807 sermon. It's a call narrative where she walks up to, it was Reverend Richard Allen at the time, who later became Bishop Richard Allen. She asked him for the right to preach, and he said that that Methodism doesn't call for, female preachers. And so she listened to what she had to say, and then she gave this sermon. It was to an audience of one, but it was a sermon nonetheless. And we look at it as a call narrative, and she has a lot of, I would say, feminist rhetoric in there. The reason I would use the term feminism is only because I don't want to assign a title. Let me actually come back a little bit. She is a proto-feminist. And so the reason I say proto-feminist is because I don't actually want to assign a title to someone. And feminism existed before womanism, and feminism focuses more on gender equality. And that's exactly what this sermon was doing. It was fighting for gender equality, the right for African American women to be able to preach.
With the opportunity to say that we're, again, appreciating you for joining us here. We thank Dr. Bynum for inviting you and being connected with your history and legacy to have that shared here at Cleveland State University. We will basically have a closing remark from Dr. Bynum and then invite our audience to listen to our other shows.
Yes, so we invite you all to come out on tomorrow at 6 p.m. Dr. Kimberly Johnson will give her lecture on Womanist Preaching, Speaking Truth to Power. I'm excited about the lecture. I met Dr. Johnson several years ago when she still is at Tennessee State, but when I was at Middle Tennessee State teaching, and our paths have crossed again, and it's good to have her here in Cleveland. Also, we would like to say that for our students to support the event on tomorrow, Black Studies majors and minors to come out and join us as well on tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the Howard A. Mims African American Cultural Center and Berkman Hall 136 across the hall where the lecture will be given.
And tomorrow is relative for our listening audience in that tomorrow is referenced to be March 21st, 2019.
Yes.
We definitely want to thank you once again for joining us, Dr. Johnson. We also ask our listening audience to consider calling us at area code 216-687-3655 to receive more information about other outstanding events that are occurring here at Cleveland State University. Again, the number to call as well as information on the screen is area code 216-687-3655. We would like to say to you as well, thank you for tuning in to Images.
You have been listening to Images, a public affairs radio program produced by the Cleveland State University Black Studies Program and this station. The opinions expressed were those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cleveland State University, the Black Studies Program, or the station. We hope you have enjoyed the music performed by the Jazz Heritage Orchestra. If you are interested in finding out more about the Black Studies Program, call 216-687-3655 or visit our website at www.csuohio.edu/blackstudies.